Right. Okay. I think you will agree that our opening panel has set the tone. We have proven to you that nothing is off limits over the course of this conference. That will now, think about it, we've discussed the role of women. Government has been told to get out of the way. Government has told private industry to grow up and take its responsibility. And it's not even 10 o'clock. So there's plenty more for us to go. But we will only succeed today if we break eggs. You cannot make an omelette without breaking eggs. And that's why our next moderator is the chef de jour, John Defterius, who takes over.
You may be loud and boisterous. My microphone's up.
Keep it about there.
Testing, there we go. Thank you, Richard. I was going to say, he may be loud and boisterous, but inside that tall, pretty smart chap is a teddy bear. So nice round of applause for Richard Quest and his nice navigating of the Middle East, North Africa, and Gulf landscape. As I like to say, Richard, thanks for coming to our region. Now, this is a good starting point, because if we think about the GCC and a country of 6 and gathering foreign direct investment, I also like to think in a broader context of the Middle East and North Africa, and a market which is nearly the size of North America at 300 million consumers. But the challenge has always been is to let this market act like a single market. So it's good to start smaller within the GCC and have the ripple effect of the broader Middle East and North Africa for investment. Now, what Richard was suggesting, the hard realities is, in 2017, global FDI amounted to $1.8 trillion last year, $1.8 trillion. The share of the MENA region of that $1.8 trillion was only $30 billion. So we need to think in a much wider context, what's going to make this region much more attractive, again, starting at the heart of it with the GCC. 30 billion versus 1.8 trillion dollars. What are the conditions that would allow investors to come in? How do geopolitics affect it? But very importantly, all the investors I speak to said, oh, I wanted to go in to Saudi Arabia, but I had to have a certain policy for Saudi Arabia. I was thinking of going to the UAE. I had to have a certain policy that would work for the UAE. Oh yes, I wanted to use Bahrain as my gateway to the GCC, but are there like-minded laws throughout the GCC to let me use it as my springboard to growth? These are key questions to ask, and we have a great array of members on the panel, both investors, policymakers, and those who are coming from the international market to take a look into the GCC about, as Richard was suggesting, what can be improved going forward. We have 45 minutes together. I want to allow at least 10 minutes at the end for questions. I'll call for the microphones. When you interject from the floor, I would just ask, make sure it's direct, it's a question, and directed to one of those on our distinguished panel. First, let's give a warm welcome to our host, and somebody who's been driving the reforms along with the Crown Prince and this distinguished cabinet here in Bahrain, Khalid Al-Rumaihi, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Economic Development Board of Bahrain. Yusuf Ali, a phenomenal personal story of building one of the largest groups, a hypermarket chain, and a lot more, the Lulu Group, the chairman of the group, Yusuf Ali, based in Abu Dhabi. A man of your stature can pick his chairs, right? Can we say that? Good. Serial investor, somebody who was instrumental in building Aramix, a great example of a company that could challenge global titans and do so right out of the Middle East and North Africa, continues to invest rapidly in high technology companies. Fadi Gandour, now of the WAMDA Group. Great to see you, Fadi. Somebody who can pepper the panel with both politics and business. Now the president of Europe and the Middle East for the very large engineering group, Bechtel, but we know him from the U.S. Diplomacy Services, Stuart Jones. Ambassador Stuart Jones. And somebody Khalid invited to our panel because of his candor, his global profile, his involvement and investment into emerging markets, particularly in commodities. Anil Kumar, based in London and India, the group CEO of Randstad. Terrific. We have 45 minutes, as I was suggesting, so I'm going to ask my panel to be very direct. If you can pick up your handheld mics and keep them with you, that'll help us a great deal. Khalid, you asked me to be straightforward and candid so we can have a real honest debate of where we stand today. We had a robust discussion at the Bahrain Gateway discussion in Davos, and a lot of investors that came in. But you said, okay, you're not going to really understand what I'm trying to do in Bahrain with this cabinet unless you kind of kick the tires on the ground in Bahrain. So why was it important for people at this stage of the development of Bahrain and the reforms that have taken place is to have Gateway Gulf here? And does it time nicely into the reforms next door in Saudi Arabia and looking at the opportunity linked between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia in your view? Why now?
Well, first of all, good morning to everybody. We're delighted to have you as our guests here at Bahrain, at Gateway Gulf. You know, we wanted to have this event because it is an inflection point in the entire Gulf at the moment. We are seeing, and I think the previous panel talked about this openness to foreign investment. Vision 2030 in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is one example of that. Every country in the GCC is looking to open itself, allow sectors that were closed to foreign investment to be open to foreign investment. So there's an inflection point. We want this event to inform investors. So we think that Bahrain is amongst that. We've been open for foreign investment for many, many years. We always find that half the battle of convincing investors, not just about Bahrain, but about the Gulf, is having them come visit. And so we wanted to have an event that would invite investors globally to come see Bahrain for themselves, to hear about the changes that are happening in the Gulf. The second, what we wanted in this event is we can talk about macro and we can sit on a stage here, but if investors have spent the time to fly many hours and come here, let's talk specifics. Let's talk about specific opportunities and investments that are going to be available to them. And over the course of the 2 days, we have sessions that are going to talk about power, renewables, real estate, manufacturing, transport. We are going to showcase projects that are in Bahrain, but we're also going to have a country lunch with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia today, a country lunch tomorrow for the state of Kuwait, a breakfast for Duqm in Oman. So we have a platform here that can show to investors, A, the inflection point, the changes that are happening, and then talk specifics about countries and about projects.
Okay. There's a giant elephant in the room because of what's happened in the last 24 hours and the decision by the United States to pull out of the JCPOA. Opportunity or threat to the investors? And I want to pepper this across to the panel here. But let's get your thoughts why the GCC can stay together, why it's a good investment opportunity now, or too great of a risk, Khalid. First, let's start and then we'll go around the panel.
I think Jassim spoke about this earlier. Every investor does a risk-reward calculation. What's the reward, what's the return I'm going to get in this region versus the potential risks in this region? And so conflict is not new to us. It's happened, you can go back all the way to the 80s, and there has been conflict in this region. But frankly, greed overcomes fear. There is a massive pipeline of projects, whether you're a Bechtel, or you're a retailer, or whether you're a manufacturer. The consuming population here, 50 million high per capita income population, the pipeline that we estimate could be as large as $1 trillion of infrastructure that will happen in this region, that outweighs the risks that potentially are out the outskirts of the region. So in our view, and you can judge by the level of interest here and elsewhere at these conferences, that people see the potential that much outweighs the risk.
Good. Anil, it's good to get your viewpoint. You operate in Russia, which has been facing quite intense sanctions. As Khalid said, in the last 40 years, we've had 1 year without some sort of conflict, and that was in 1989, at the end of the Iran-Iraq war and before the Gulf War, right? So this is a region, a business community that's used to it, but how do you see it yourself?
Yeah, no, thank you. I tend to agree with Khalid. End of the day, when we come as a business community, we want to look at what's in it for me. And the world is going to a different phase. We're looking at a different world altogether. So there's every part of the world, there is something going on. So does it deter us? I don't think so. I think it challenges us more. And I think there's a very old saying where I come back from home in India is that you always right when you're on the side of the truth. So we are on the side of the truth means if GCC and the countries which are developing the Middle East region, if they stick to what they say, I think these threats really don't mean anything to a business investor. Then you have people who come with very narrow-minded idea where they want everything on a platform. Well, if you want everything on a platform, you don't need to come here.
Right. So you have to navigate the politics, but the opportunities. I think, Yusuf, it'd be great to have your thoughts. You've created the Lulu hypermarket chain. You have to pick the countries in which to go in today. But since you came as a young man from Kerala into Abu Dhabi and were able to establish this over the 4 decades, when you saw the different risks around the region, how did it affect your mentality for investment?
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. See, I'm talking the perspective of investment in any countries. If an investor go to any country, what he is watching, what he want to know, visionary leadership. The visionary leadership can make ease of doing business. That is number 1.
Ease of doing business.
Ease of doing business.
Okay, good.
Because the visionary leaders can bring ease of doing business.
Okay, so to Khalid's point here, because we want to drill down quickly, right?
Yes.
So we have 45 minutes. Which countries in the GCC make it easy for you to do business?
Let me complete this. So, first, visionary leadership. Second, the economy. How the economy works in that country. Second, security and stability. Because if you go to any country, we will see what is the security and stability of that country. 4, the workforce. So a foreign direct investor to going to any country, he need to know what these 4 things are there or not. That is my perspective, and I think that all investors, those who are here, will agree that. So in GCC countries, we are in this region, my late father since 66, I'm here 45 years. So we know that the visionary leaders of these great countries, GCC, they step by step, they are making the law ease of doing business. And second, economy. Now, 2 years before, people were talking, when the petrol price came to $35, they say, what will happen to GCC? What will happen to these countries? I debated, I discussed, I went to so many channels. I saw since 45 years, I am seeing this scenario graph. Petrol price will go, petrol price will come, petrol price will go and come. But the visionary leaders of these GCC great countries, whatever the natural resources, they are investing their own country infrastructure. See the GCC countries' infrastructure. Any European countries you go, the infrastructure in GCC countries is great. And second, they are making the new rules and regulations for ease of doing business. The SAJIA, our Honorable Governor here, SAJIA in Saudi Arabia, EDB in Bahrain, and Abu Dhabi and Dubai investment authorities, all these rules in Kuwait also, and all these countries, they are making, Sultanate of Oman, all these countries, they are making new rules and regulations. That's why I told ease of doing business, if visionary leadership. And see, security. You go to any GCC countries, how security they are, how secure they are, how secure your family are, how secure expatriates are, how secure the nationals are. So these 4 aspects. Now the petrol price is 70, 75. Nobody is talking now. When it comes to 35, big debate, big discussion, what will happen to GCC countries? When it comes to 75, why you people are not talking? So this is the thing. That's why we are in this country, GCC, and now we are going to Egypt and other Far East countries. Thank you.
You're investing in Egypt, which is another topic, but it ranked very high last year in terms of FDI, but not in proportion to its population. Yusuf, Fadi brought up this idea of infrastructure, and I want to present this to both of you because you're an infrastructure person as well. There's hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure, and I think it's an essential differential here. There's a propensity to put money into hard infrastructure, which you need, the basics of it, but perhaps not the right soft infrastructure for training and education. Now, to be fair, everybody who comes to Bahrain says they like the style of the workforce and the eager attitude to jump in, and they have the right educational background. What's the balance between hard and soft infrastructure that needs to be struck at this stage? Because there's been so much money into hard infrastructure for the last decade.
Well, I think the hard infrastructure is fantastic in the region, so there's no question about it in every sense of the word. But there isn't much happening in soft infrastructure, I'll be honest with you. So soft infrastructure means how are we going to prepare the future generations of youth in the region, and I don't need to throw the statistics again. This is a region of young people. How are we preparing them for the job market? Are we going to continue to put an education system that employs them in government, even though government says we really don't want to employ these people in government? Or are we going to prepare them to go out to the private sector job market, or to be entrepreneurs, or to become job creators rather than job seekers? How are we going to entice these people to think that the private sector is actually a place where they can build a career, where they can build a future? So it starts at the soft infrastructure is about it. The other point that you talk about is what sort of laws and regulations exist so that you can help these young, I'm not talking about the established people, I'm talking about the young entrepreneurs, the young individuals that want to start businesses. How easy is it to start a business? How much capital does it require? What are the laws? And then how are we going to open markets for them? So, I mean, you're not going to have a thriving economy in the region unless the regional markets become open. If you don't have the ease of moving goods and trade and capital across the region, you're not going to have the scale of businesses that is required, and that's all soft infrastructure. That's all government instigated. The government needs to say, we're opening up, we're ready for business, and we actually want our youth to be in the private sector or become entrepreneurs. So it's known. I mean, I'm not saying anything new. This is off the shelf. The studies, the consultants, and everyone that tells you what the remedies are in the region, it's already on the shelf. You need to take it off the shelf and actually start in the implementation process. It's not about buildings, it's about people.
Terrific. Stuart, why don't you weigh in both with your diplomatic cap and one at Bechtel now that you've gone into the private sector here? There's an understanding to have the hard and soft infrastructure. So yes, we love the fact that the airports work and the roads work and they're moving to rails and the rest, even a hyperloop that we're discussing in the UAE, but striking that balance at this stage of the cycle after that investment in hard infrastructure.
Thanks, John, and thank you, Khalid, for having us, and it's an honor to be on this panel with all of you, and especially with Fadi, who I think sort of has created a model for young Arabs to follow as an entrepreneur and to create someone who has been able to build businesses and create businesses and develop technologies. And I think that part of the workforce development in the GCC and in the Arab world has really started. I think the GCC especially has shown tremendous success in educating the leaders of tomorrow. And when you walk into government offices today, it's impressive to see the qualifications. But from a Bechtel standpoint, we do see a need for greater workforce development. We need to have workers who are willing to go to work on the Riyadh Metro or on Potline 6 here in Bahrain. People who are welders, people who are project managers. And I think that level of workforce development infrastructure still needs a great deal of attention from governments. So very good at, the highest level of education, lots of very well-educated people who are willing to come in at the investor level, at the entrepreneur level, at the senior manager level. But we need middle-level managers, and we need workers who are, willing to come in and do the really hard work of building the state. One of the things that Bechtel does extremely well in the United States is it mobilizes a highly skilled, highly paid workforce to go out and build LNG plants or refineries or subways. And we'd like to see more of that here, and indeed we'd like to participate more in that workforce capacity building.
Okay, very good. Khalid, where's the government want to facilitate but not compete against business? Now, this is an art, right? Because the government had such a dominant role in creating jobs, it was almost pushing out the private sector, and I'd be pretty blind to miss the red badges. It's like the red badges are coming, but it is Team Bahrain. And how does this fit into the team of Bahrain saying we're the government as a facilitator, not a competitor? And this is a constant complaint in the region. The government plays too much of a role. How do you strike that balance?
Well, first of all, our Vision 2030, which was launched by His Majesty in 2008, almost 10 years ago, focused on how we move the government to downsize its role in the economy and increase the incentivization for the private sector to take up that slack. Team Bahrain for us represents a mindset that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has emphasized, which is don't think in silos. And I'll give you an example. About 2 years ago, we had to go to Seattle to see Andy Jassy, who runs Amazon Web Services. And we went, Minister of Transport, the head of our Sovereign Wealth Fund, the head of our e-government, and myself. We went to say, here are the most senior decision makers who were going to work as a team to give you a value proposition to make Amazon Web Services choose Bahrain as a destination. And to us, frankly, that's how Bechtel works. If Bechtel is going out to talk to a major infrastructure client, Stuart is not going to go alone saying, I'm the head of Europe, Middle East, Africa. You're going to bring your, your public-private partnership team. You're going to bring the power of Bechtel to that client to say, we are going to deliver a solution for you. And so that's the way, our badges are red, because that's to say everybody, from the most junior person to the most senior person in this government, will collaborate and be solution providers. And it's not enough just to pitch it. We spent 2 years meeting on a monthly basis with Amazon. And we did that, by the way, 2 weeks ago. We went to Louisville, Kentucky, the head of our customs, the head of our the Minister of Transport. And we went and made the same story, and his reaction to us was, I've never seen a government come to Louisville, of all places, with senior decision makers taking the time to fly 14 hours to tell me we are going to solve, we want you to come here, and that's how what value we're going to deliver. So Team Bahrain is about working together as one team, much like the private sector, and being able to deliver solutions.
Okay, Anil, what do you think as an international investor a priority is? What would you tell Khalid? What is a priority for you to come in? The complaint I hear is that each country is a silo and they all have different laws, and I wanted to go into that market, but the law in Bahrain was different than next door in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What's a priority for you to get in?
I think, John, that's a good question, and I always wanted to ask Khalid. And I just feel that one size doesn't fit all. We need to understand what works in one country doesn't work in another country. The whole idea is that we need to import ready-made companies to come and invest in a country, I think is out-fashioned, old, outdated. We have two entrepreneurs sitting here who did something on their own without any Walmarts or DHL or anybody. Why doesn't GCC on its own decide to do something which is homegrown? You could do your own Amazon, you could do your own Deliveroo, you could do your own Uber. You don't need to go to somebody. There is enough technology, enough availability, and your own workforce. Okay, it's tough to start with, but amazing what you could do if you do those things, because as an outsider, I would like to come in and do something which is unique to the region. One size doesn't fit all. One of your neighboring countries tried to import stock market, stock exchange, oil exchange, they all failed. Not because the country can't do that. The reason they failed is they were trying to copy a model. which doesn't fit your DNA. You got to work. So GCC should be like Europe, where you see there are different country, different background, different language, but they managed to work together till UK decided to throw in the towel, which is stupid according to me, but you can't.
Good. Bring your microphone just up a little bit. I have a follow-up question. Common law, even in Dubai, they kind of pride themselves on having English law at the DIFC. But what is the challenge for you to make sure the legal framework, and this worn-out phrase, governance, is it the right governance, right? But why does governance matter as an international investor? And Stuart, I think this is a good one for you to chime in on as well.
Okay, look, again, I'm a rank outsider here, so I see what will bring me in. And I think common law is one of the biggest hurdle and hindrance. Again, one of your neighboring countries have a different law in DIFC, different if I'm in downtown Dubai, and different if I'm in Jebel Ali. It's far too confusing, but it's not about my company. It's about my company and my people. So if I send in 1,000 people to work in the company, what exactly are they subject to? So we need to have a common law for right across, and not one law for the business, one law for person, and one law for the home. So I just think this is one of the most important aspects, which as a GCC, you should have a federal law which governs the whole thing. And that's my view on it.
Okay, let's have Khalid jump in before I bring in the others. What are you doing on that front to have compatible laws in the GCC if we're talking about a single market?
Well, I think we forget, first of all, you know, the GCCs have these Gulf countries have evolved very rapidly from, you know, independence in 1970. It's about 48 years, 50 years of independence. And so there is a evolution that's happening within each country, and I have no doubt that we're going to tie up and make laws common amongst the GCC. I'll talk about bankruptcy law. Bankruptcy law has just been introduced in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We passed it through our parliament. It's going to be enacted in, I would say, weeks. That's going to be critical for entrepreneurship, what you just mentioned. I absolutely believe if the problem of the Middle East is job creation. Why are we attracting all of these investors? It's to create jobs. If we have to create 100 million jobs, we're not going to do it by bringing FDI alone. We're going to do it by creating entrepreneurs who are going to be job creators themselves. So regulation around bankruptcy, making it easy for them to start. But I would have to say, I mean, to Fadi's point, it's not just the laws, it's a mindset change. We need to encourage our youth to take risks. Regulation should make it easy for them to fail and restart. But then again, they have to also understand that there are role models. Instead of taking that government job, I want to become an entrepreneur and succeed like Fadi. Or I want to create a company that becomes as successful as Kareem. So there's some work that happens at the government, but there's a lot more that has to happen in a mindset, and they need role models, and they need some laws. I'm not going to say laws are going to solve it completely.
Yeah, but the bankruptcy law is a complaint that people had for decades, right? And that's changed, Fadi?
And the mindset is learnable. This is learnable. It's something that you can actually go out and do, and that's why education matters, because you build that knowledge, Khalid. You build it. The kids that go to school actually understand that as they go through it, their mindset actually is changed and directed to the process of what happens in the marketplace down the road. So if you want that state of mind to change, you put it in the education system, you influence the family, government needs to understand it. So critical, Khalid. But on the issue of law, it is actually the implementation of law. So I love laws, but the laws are not implemented equally and predictably. Then you are going to have problems. I mean, I think the region has good laws in general. But I want to see that the supremacy of the law, I want to see that the foreign investor comes to town and knows that if something happens, he can get the legal recourse that he requires to be protected in that single country.
I'll give you an example. I think you're absolutely right. Implementation is key. We had a legal case here amongst a foreign investor and a department in the government. And guess what? That investor won his legal case. You have to show that if you are a foreign investor and you have a dispute,
you need to tell that story. Because it gives comfort. The investor actually cares. I mean, people ask, is it tax or not tax? I don't think investors care as much as tax as much as they care about the predictability of the implementation of law.
And the follow-through.
There's no question about it.
Okay, perfect. Stuart, do you want to weigh in on this? Because one would say, well, geez, Bechtel is so big, they don't have to worry about the laws. They can kind of plow through it. Is that the truth, or is it is that still on your checklist before Bechtel goes after a large engineering contract, infrastructure contract?
Well, I think what Khalid and Fadi are saying is right. I think there's been extraordinary progress in terms of law and regulation here in the Gulf over the last several years. But the challenge is that where Bahrain wants to be and where the Gulf wants to be is really 21st century. So we talk about public-private partnerships. So right now in Canada, Bechtel is joining a public-private partnership for a light rail system in Edmonton, Canada. And Bechtel's actually putting its own money in the game because we recognize that the construction business has become so competitive, we have to participate in these investments. So when I ask our public-private partnership expert, as you said, we have experts on all these things, hey, why don't we do that in Bahrain? He said, you know, there's already a very rich ecosystem for public-private partnerships in Canada. It's been done many times. We know how it's going to work. It's very predictable. Not only do they have the laws, not only do they have the regulations, but they have a method of doing things. There's an understanding with officials on how this is going to look at the end. Look, you can't get there overnight, but I think coming into a public-private partnership in Bahrain, that's the assurance that Bechtel would be looking for, is that we would have a partnership where we're going to build an ecosystem of trust and confidence, where we share a vision for how this is all going to end up. And sometimes along the way, the regulations may have to change. Sometimes along the way, the law is going to have to be applied in a way that ensures that we get to our shared end goal. Not to say that we can break the rules, but we have to have that sense of understanding and partnership if we're going to come into this relatively new, untested area of public-private partnerships in the Gulf.
Okay, I want to spend 10 minutes on innovation. One concept, what I like about you is you say, well, I'm going to go do something. I come back 6 months later and it's in the pipeline. You talked of creating a fund of funds for technology, venture capital. I know Fadi has some pretty strong thoughts about this as well. There's a propensity to go with the flash, a vision fund that's invests in SoftBank, for example, and the aspirations by the kingdom to drive this through Silicon Valley. How are you trying to be innovative and saying, okay, this is the government investing or pulling money into technology companies that come back and invest in Bahrain? What's the opportunity, for example, in fintech in that space?
Well, number one, we think that technology is going to disrupt every sector. So you cannot look at finance, you cannot look at retail. Mr. Yusuf Ali will look at his stores and he's probably thinking about technology. So if we acknowledge that technology is going to disrupt every sector, then this region should not be just an importer of technology. It should think about how we adapt and create our own technology companies and pioneers. And we looked at our ecosystem in the region and we said, venture capital needs to be part of that ecosystem. We need money that will fund these startups, these entrepreneurs. And we wanted it to be, Bahrain, to be a hub for startups from across the Middle East. We want Jordanian entrepreneurs, Tunisian entrepreneurs, Indian entrepreneurs. So how do we solve that venture capital gap? Either the government can deploy $100 million. We said we think $100 million for our economy is sufficient. And to me, bureaucrats will never invest that money. A bureaucrat is going to worry, I get punished for the downside, I'm never going to get paid more for the upside. So the government should not invest that capital. So we thought there are examples of countries that have done a fund of funds. Let's create a fund of funds that will invest in people who know how this business works. They are venture capitalists. They've earned their right, they've earned their experience. And the only ask of us is they have a presence in Bahrain. And that will, so that 100 million that we've just closed this week is going to be given to venture capital firms that will choose to have a presence in Bahrain. We will not interfere in their investment strategy. We will not say you have to allocate it. But by being here, by being in this country, they're going to have lunch with entrepreneurs. They're going to have dinner. They're going to interact with those entrepreneurs. And we have no doubt that money will flow to entrepreneurs that will choose to be in Bahrain.
Does it work or not, Fadi? What's your thought? This concept?
Absolutely, it works. It's been tried somewhere else, and it does work. It also takes away from the competition of government. So what you said is that government should not invest directly. You invest through funds, you invest through institutions that know how to take risk and know how to actually take these companies and add value to them so that they can grow. So it is quite a bold initiative from EDB, from Bahrain, to actually say we want to do that. And not only give you the money, we want you to have a presence here because you need to teach the next generation of possible venture capital people from Bahrain to actually create their own thing. The critical element here, and maybe that's something for everyone to discuss, is how do you actually entice the sovereigns? Because you talk about foreign investments. Our sovereigns are the biggest foreign investors somewhere else. I'm not going to venture too much there. How do we get them to believe that this is an investable region also? You can actually make money. You can diversify and invest and make money. And these are the first people who understand this region and its risks. So a foreign investor might not understand it as we do. Our sovereigns know that exactly what it is, and they can actually help in articulating a story of why this region is the region to invest by being at the forefront of investors in this region.
Good.
And
I don't want to belabor the point, but I think Uber and Careem are a good example. There was sovereign money that went into Uber, and you're an investor in Careem. Was it eye-popping to you, the amount of money that went into Uber?
The number is eye-popping anyway, so wherever it goes, it's eye-popping. But I'll tell you what the story of Careem and Uber is. On the regulatory side, and very quickly, I don't want to dominate this. Look, the region, to be positive, when Careem and Uber came into the region, a new technology, there was no regulatory environment to allow them to do it. Some countries did not know how to react. I think many other countries went very quickly with them, regulated it, and created massive amounts of jobs. You know, in Saudi Arabia, more than 70 to 80,000 Saudis now, Saudi citizens, are in the business of Careem and Uber. So regulation matters. And if you're quick in it, you're going to influence that industry and make it happen.
Okay, very quickly. Before I come back to Yusuf, I want to bring in Anil. I saw a skeptical look in your eye. I'm wondering why.
I heard you both, and I just feel, again, when you talk about venture capital, I think we call them vulture capital back home in England, because that's not the right model, and maybe I'm totally wrong. You got to give away funds free of cost to your entrepreneurs to start, and you start from the bottom. Your education system, you want to understand, train them vocationally that this is what we want you to do, and not just pick and choose, because we just cannot create tech entrepreneurs overnight. It comes from the DNA, from the system. So what I think is, having an education system which one size fits all is not the right thing. You got to start at early age, a kind of a vocational training for a particular skill set. I may not be skilled enough to do IT, I may be skilled enough to do mining. So everybody doesn't fit things. So we need to be very careful when we say we're going to have a lot of emphasis on our education system. If you want to have a lot of emphasis on the education system, you got to make sure it is a meaningful education system. Again, I was talking to Ibrahim from Saudi yesterday, and we were talking, how do you can create white-collar workers, how do you create blue-collar workers? Because nobody wants to do the blue-collar job. So how do you balance your imports of human or immigrants or expats, whatever you call them? We back in England, we have a big problem. We don't want expats, we want locals to do it. But then we look at it, can we survive? No, we can't. So the Brexit have been toned down to something. Same thing, as a developing country, you need to understand you're not developed world. And I'm sorry to say that, but you need to restart at the engagement level where you can create people, you can create company, and forget venture capital, and I'm again wrong maybe, create free funds, give them money to play with. And if they get it wrong, they don't have the fear of losing out. So that's what I think.
Okay, hold it there.
I will answer him later.
Go ahead.
I have an answer for him, but after Mr. Yusuf Ali.
But before I call on to Yusuf.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm moderating. I'll handle it. You be quiet. I'll come back to you in a second. No, I'm just joking. We have fun because we know each other. I'm going to call on you in a second. I just want to see if there's any questions from the floor, because I want to get the microphones in the hands on the essence of time. Put your hand up and we'll get a microphone too. There's a question here. Microphone, please. And is there a question from this side of the room at all? Don't sit on your hands, please.
They're convinced.
You made a great point, Anil, and I'll come to the question in just a moment. You made a fantastic point. How do you create blue-collar jobs? And you wanted to talk about innovation within the supermarket business today. and job creation as a result, right? You're competing against the next generation of Amazons. So what investments are you making in Bahrain, for example, in the hypermarket chain, and what innovations will lead to job creations at that level, Yusuf?
See, in any business, I rightly support the innovation and transformation and also using the technology in any business. You think about supermarket business. Now everybody health cautious. Now we have got the technology, the new technology. Now diet free, diet food, diabetic food, gluten free. All these new innovations, salmonella free, chemical free, this is the duty of any supermarket or hypermarket business people to promote this because this is health conscious involved. So we should use the technology in any kind of business. This is what I support them, number one. Number two, you are asking about workforce, about the job creation.
Yes.
See, everybody has got responsibility to the country where they are working. So now the young youth, especially in the GCC countries, they are very intelligent, intellectual, and especially the girls. 1,000+ girls working in Saudi Arabia in my hypermarkets, you can see, in supermarkets. Bahrain, we have got very good workforce and they are very hard work. And in Sultanate of Oman, in Kuwait, other, GCC countries. It is our duty also to promote and to educate and to train the local.
Okay, very quickly, in 30 seconds, how much training or retraining do you have to do in Bahrain when you hire somebody?
No, we started with 80 Bahrainis first. Now we have got about 800+ Bahrainis working for us. And now we have got staff since 12 years working with us.
Wow.
In Bahrain.
Excellent.
So they are very hardworking and very entrepreneurial. And we are teaching them. We are IT, especially in the IT field. Also, we are training them. We took them to India for special training for IT. Oh. This is our responsibility also.
Excellent. Okay, the question from the floor. Go ahead and stand up, please. Just mention who you are and who you want the question for.
Sure. My name is Basim Sai. I'm from Bahrain. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for having this wonderful event. From the name of the forum, Gateway Gulf, I think the elephant in the room is that what's limiting the capacity of growth and further opportunities is the further integration of the GCC. Yeah. So that is, for us, is the elephant in the room. We've been hearing about it for a long time, and that's, I think, the biggest obstacle that is holding this whole area from really blossoming. So that was my view, our question.
I'm glad you brought it up because it's a key issue. Everybody wants to operate in their own silo and protect their own market. How do you knock down barriers? First quickly, and then Fadi, if you can. Because you started Aramex. I'm sure it wasn't easy to get regulations in each market. Khalid?
We have a lot of work to do. So I'm not going to say that we're there or that there is enough synergy or collaboration, that we need more. But I'll give you an example. I think it works bilaterally. We looked at our causeway between the Kingdom of Bahrain and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we said, it was incumbent on us to go to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with a solution. And it was around products, it was around logistics. And what we developed with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was an ability to transport goods, to have a fast lane for goods that would go either from Saudi to Bahrain or vice versa. That would be a known shipper route. It was a fast track route. If we know the shipper, if we know the manufacturer, then why don't we establish pre-clearance and allow those goods to flow? Instead of a day, it would go down to now 10 hours, and our ambition to drop it to 4 hours. We achieved that. We didn't wait for a GCC meeting to occur. Let's do it bilaterally. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has looked at that and said, hold on, I'd like to replicate this with other countries. So I think the way to do it, instead of just waiting for everyone to agree, is to do it bilaterally, and then there's a ripple effect that happens across the Gulf. And I think that's the model we'd like to pursue.
Okay, Fadi, before you jump in, just a sec, sorry. On Mondelez, I was surprised. I actually had a chance to go to the plant, I think it was 18 months ago, to shoot. Mondelez added another plant in your free zone, and they're distributing throughout not just the GCC now, but the MENA region, and some of the product goes to the United States. What allowed them to do so? How difficult was it?
Well, their requirement was that we drop the transit time across the causeway. I mean, when we did this work, they said, we're going to produce 10,000 biscuits, Oreo biscuits, a minute. We have actually a big Oreo biscuit in the lobby. It's the biggest in the Guinness Book of World Records, but they're producing a lot of goods that are going to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. 98% of their exports are going to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So for us, getting ease of access into Saudi Arabia, ensuring that there was a streamlined process, was a prerequisite. They said, we're going to invest this money, but we're going to monitor goods. And so what convinced them was that. What convinced them is the fact that we have a low-cost environment, 40% less, more cost competitive than neighboring cities. The fact that there's 100% foreign ownership privileges. So Bahrain has the ability, if it integrates, and it is, with our neighbor, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, if we focus on, again, through Team Bahrain, delivering solutions quickly and rapidly across government, we have an ability to be a Hong Kong to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That is our hubbing model. And I think that's something that we are determined. Again, we look at Vision 2030, we see a tremendous growth potential. Bahrain has a role to complement that vision.
Okay, very good.
And so I want to vouch for what Khalid just said. So on the causeway issue and on the logistics issue, the more the regulatory environment eased, the more Aramex did. So Aramex actually uses Bahrain as its entry point into Saudi Arabia today, and we're doing a lot. And they were forthcoming in understanding the challenges and actually opening up to that. And the more they opened, the more we were able to do. And now the biggest challenge, and I think it's being addressed, is how do you actually expand the capacity of the causeway so that you can do more. It's not only Aramex, but most of the logistics companies actually do that.
And that's going to be presented in one of the investment sessions, the King
It's
Hamad
critical.
Causeway.
Critical. The more, if you open it up, then you're going to double, quadruple the business that you get there. But to answer the gentleman there, and he's an entrepreneur, it is, look, everybody talks about how do we create a Silicon Valley. Without markets, you are not going to have a Silicon Valley in the region. The single most important thing in Silicon Valley, you can talk universities, capital, etc., etc. But a startup in Silicon Valley has the United States of America as its market. Nobody asks questions if you set up in New York, Los Angeles, or San Francisco for that matter. Goods travel without anybody stopping it. And then entrepreneur does not have to think of the issues we have to think about. So an entrepreneur in the region actually suffers because he has to face so many issues. We should actually call them heroes because they do what they do. And they are, I'll tell you, they are much better than entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley because they're able to do so much more.
Okay, very good. I'm going to thank you for the interjection there. That was a tribute to you two, I think, well, a self-tribute and one. Your story is quite interesting, where you started from and what you built. I got to say, Aramex the same way. 5 minutes to go, so I'm going to ask everybody to be very brief. A question here, and we had a question there. You guys, I got to get the microphones in their hands, please. Go ahead and stand up, sir. And we had another question here in the corner. Yeah, but this gentleman had his hand up first. And if I'm sorry, just get a second microphone to the gentleman there. You guys put your hands up. There you go. A second microphone to the gentleman there. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Fadi Al-Majali. I'm the president of Foreign Investor Association in Bahrain. It's not a question, actually. Small note. I just want to describe our experience in Bahrain as a foreign investors. It's really, it's just perfect. In Bahrain, you can set up your business in a very low cost of living as well, very low of inflation rate. Not only this, if you need a financial support, easily you can approach Tamkeen. I just want to say thank you, Bahrain.
Okay, thank you very much. Come on up. Just a second. Khalid, this is a cost advantage. You're bringing pay tabs, for example, which does B2B payments around the world, I think over 140 countries. So Saudi entrepreneur, he had a chance to look at different places. 30 seconds why he set up in Manama. What sort of package did you put together for them?
Well, you can ask Abdulaziz himself. He looked at various options. He came because of human capital. You ask him, who are his people here on the ground? They're men and women, young, willing to work hard, willing to work in blue-collar jobs. And so human capital, cost competitiveness. He's got to be competitive globally. He himself has seen the 30% to 40% cost advantage that you have here versus neighboring cities in the Gulf. And again, it was about the support he got across the government. We had to work with somebody like Abdulaziz in PayTabs because it's new. It's setting up a payment system to work with the central bank because we had to work with him to overcome those barriers. So I think he was convinced on cost and human capital. He was convinced to grow. He went from 10 people to 400 people because he saw a government that was nimble and agile and willing to work with him in terms of addressing the challenges.
Good. Came from Saudi Aramco, which is interesting. So a spin-off entrepreneur from Aramco. This is the final question from the floor. Please come out. We can't see you back there.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Be very quick, and then I'm going to ask a final comment of Khalid, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Anil. I come from Oman. This morning, the discussion focused on how much the government should participate in the economic development. And there was a discussion on the private sector should be given enough room to stand on its own. And if you look at with the developed world, like in terms of how much the fiscal policy in order to stimulate growth and those kind of things. One thing is all the GCC governments, because of the oil crash, they're actually spending a lot of money because the private sector is not in a position to push the growth, and that is very good. And
excuse me, just a second. We're tight on time. The question.
Yes.
Your question.
My question is in terms of like FDI. Now, if you want to attract FDI, because of the low oil prices and for future growth, in terms of approvals and process, like I see a big difference in, say, for example, Dubai and certain parts of the world. So each country is acting, seems to be acting more on its own rather than a coordinated approach to benefit as a whole.
Okay, very good. Is that a challenge or an opportunity? Is it good to have these GCC states, Anil, fighting against each other for FDI? I would think it's a good thing, right? Or not?
I think it's amazing because you compete with each other, you have a different DNA, and I have spent some time since last evening and I met some amazing people. And I do feel a lot of vibe in the room, a lot of expectation. And again, I feel Bahrain has a big brother next door, and they've got to work with that. And I just can't not say that the China-Hong Kong model will work fantastically for you. You become the gateway, and the Saudi helps you, Saadia. And I just feel everybody seems to be very bullish. There are a lot of young people here, the new breed who are running the countries now. And when you listen to them, and I think at least they should not compete with each other. Let the other region compete, but competition is healthy.
Okay. Final comment from Khalid here. It's a very blunt question. There's two aspects to it. Number one, it's such a large economy at your doorstep. Creates a lot of opportunity, but it could almost swallow you up. And I know there's worries about tourism competition because of all the giga projects that are taking place in Saudi Arabia. That's one question. And then the pace of change in Saudi Arabia. It's a big economy. Managing step by step that change, or is it going too fast? How do we monitor what's going on there and implementation in Saudi Arabia? It's not small like Bahrain, and it actually delivers. This is a new experience. The Crown Prince is busting down barriers. The opportunity and the risk, would you say?
First of all, I think you only have to be in the presence of His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman. You feel the energy. I was at FII in October last year, and you could see the boldness of the vision and the determination. And then when you meet his generals, the ministers, you can see that determination, the speed at which they're moving. I'm an optimist. I think that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will move the needle for that country. I think it's a huge economy. It's about time they had manufacturing serving the businesses in Saudi Arabia. I think what they are about to do in manufacturing is overdue. I think opening up the country, allowing women to drive, allowing cinemas, I was with His Excellency Ahmed Al-Khatib a week ago. He was saying $20 billion of spend by Saudi tourists is going outside. And he said, by the way, 90% of that is not going to the GCC. That's going to Europe and the US. If they can retain 10 to 20% of that by having these concerts, these events, then why not? Why don't they allow that money to recirculate in the economy? So I think they will move the needle on the country. I'm a big optimist in terms of what I see in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. How it impacts the region, I think it's a net positive. I think that if we start to see industries in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that weren't present before, if they start up a defense industry, then that's something. There's a value chain that we can plug into not only the Kingdom of Bahrain, but Kuwait, Oman, the UAE. That industry was manufactured in Europe or the US. Now it's present in the GCC. We can add value to that. So I think it's a net positive. I think on the tourism question, we launched, the Minister of Industry, Commerce and Tourism had a launch of the new vision for Gulf Air yesterday. We intend to increase our network connectivity. Dubai's success has, by the way, shared its benefits to around the Gulf. There are tourists who come to Dubai today who say, I'm going to spend a few extra days and go to Oman or Bahrain. So I think we shouldn't see this as a zero-sum game. There is an ability to complement each other. If we can figure out how to complement, then there is room for all of us. And I think Saudi is the big giant in the Gulf. Their growth is good for everyone.
Okay, thanks very much. I have a very important housekeeping announcement, so I want everybody to tune in. We're going to be blessed to have His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa addressing the Gateway Conference here at 11 o'clock originally, but we started 15 minutes late, so we're going to extend the coffee break to 11:15. And I'm sure he would understand that as well. So when you hear the bells going off, let's say 10 past 11, you're back in your seats. We don't want to have a case where everybody's running in the room when His Royal Highness takes the stage as well. Thanks for the invitation again. We're going to have another session around noon on tourism development and real estate investment here. You gave us a mandate to have a very candid conversation. I think it actually did what we said we would do. Fadi, it was great. Yusuf is great. Anil, Stuart, thanks very much. Nice round of applause to our panels. And we go to the coffee break.